今回この動画では日本でも最近上場した世界でも有名なカルダノエイダ、この創始者でもあるチャールズ・ホスキンソンさんにインタビューをすることができました。で、今回の動画は実は後編なんですね。で、前編の方はチャールズさんの自己紹介だったりとか、どういう幼少期を過ごしたのかとか、どういう人生を歩んできて、どういうタイミングでクリプトに入ってイーサリアムを立ち上げて、でカルダノを立ち上げたのか、あとアフリカでどういうことをやってるのか、そんなことをねいろいろ聞いてきてるんですけど、この動画ではアフリカでのチャレンジだったりとか、今後エルサルバドルでカルダノはどういうふうに展開していくのかとか、あとはスマートコントラクトのいろんなプラットフォームありますけど、今後どういうところが注目ポイントになってくるのかとかね、業界の変革とかね、いろんなところをざっくばらんに聞いてきたので、まだ前半見てないよという人は前半を見た後に後半こっちに来て全部見ていただければと思います。それではどうぞ。
So from this ID perspective, I think I can see like huge impact on it for sure. And then what's your view on like how easy it is for Africa to adopt like a blockchain based like a, for example, financial system? Because I heard the rumor that because there's just so many corruption, right? Like cash just back and forth, and like people put cash in the pocket, like a backdoor deal, whatever, and then there's just a huge resistance from those like a party as well. So I thought like it may not be like a really easy task to do so. What's your view on this?
Yeah, so it's important to understand that you can only change at the rate of the change that the people are willing to change with. And so in Africa, there's a big transition from the old to the young. A lot of the leaders are in their 70s and 80s, and they're being replaced with leaders in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And these ones have grown up with internet and computers, and they want to digitize it. The other thing is a lot of these kids have had to live with the corruption their whole life, and they're sick of it. And so they want to change the system. And the problem is you can't rely on virtue. You have to rely on systems to get rid of corruption. And I have a very good example of this. So I'm friends with the former finance minister of the country of Georgia. It's an Eastern European country. And they gave him the worst job in the country. They said, you need to go clean up the police force. And that's like the job that nobody wants, because the police will just shoot you. And they were one of the most corrupt police in all of Eastern Europe.
Wow. Okay.
In fact, it was so bad that when you flew into Tbilisi, they'd give you a bribe sheet. So it's like a sheet telling you how much you should expect to pay in bribes for various government services.
What? Really?
I know, they give Western businessmen a bribe sheet. This is something the government actually issued. This is how corrupt it was. They were just resigned to corruption. Wow. So he thought about it for a while, and he said, okay, well, my problem is if I put a virtuous cop in with these corrupt police officers, he has to become corrupt. Because if he doesn't become corrupt, they'll kill him. So you can't reform that group of bad apples. You just simply have to clear them all out. So what he did is he got a bunch of police officers, candidates, to travel to America and trained in an entire parallel police force in America for 6 months. When they were done, sent them back and fired every police officer in the entire country and replaced them with a new set of police officers. Then he banned the carrying of cash. He said the police officers are not allowed to carry cash. And he had a second group of police officers randomly pull over the police and search them. And if they had cash, he'd fire them on the spot.
Oh, wow.
So they, by doing that, went from one of the most corrupt police forces in Europe to one of the least corrupt police forces in just a 5-year period. It was a remarkable transition. Now, they still have some issues here and there, but it was a dramatic change. And that was a systems level change. So when you look at a lot of these young African nations that are globalizing, there's a huge appetite to change the way that business works and the systems so that people can't be corrupt. They're self-auditing and self-certifying. There's a balance there. And, to these entrenched interests, they make a calculation. They say, well, yes, we can be corrupt. And would you rather be corrupt in a poor nation, or would you rather be a wealthy businessman in a rich nation? And so they actually usually can make more money when the country gets richer, because they happen to own a lot of the businesses and infrastructures and these things than they could just by robbing the poor on a daily basis. And every time it's been tried, it's consistently worked in every place it's been tried. But there's no silver bullet for it. It's hard work. You have setbacks. We've lost bids where there was clearly bribery and corruption on the other side. I mean, there was one thing that we wanted to do in a certain country that shall remain nameless, where it was a deal that we thought would cost us about $500,000 to deliver. I really wanted the deal, so I bid $100,000, and I said, I'll do it as charity. And then someone underbid us and bid $20,000 to service 1.2 million people. It just, there was no way the math could work. So we said, okay, that's corruption, because as soon as they get awarded, they're going to renegotiate and get $2-3 million from the deal or something like that. And they're going to hire someone's uncle and brother. So we do see that. We do see that a lot. And so you have to understand that the time horizons of these deals are usually about 3 years to 7 years. So the Ethiopia deal, for example, we started negotiating that in 2018. We closed it this year.
Okay, so 3 years.
So yeah, so it takes quite a bit of time to be able to negotiate and close these things. But on the other hand, when you do it, you get 5 million users, 10 million users, and so that's a lot of people. And if you look at a 5, 10, 15-year horizon, when you start adding it up, you start looking at hundreds of millions of people that you eventually get. And those people then eventually will create liquidity for billions to trillions of dollars of assets that enter the global marketplace. So you have to be very patient. And the American entrepreneurs, we're not very patient. We're very fast. It has to be done now. What's the next startup? But these are systems for governance and for how human beings live. And historically, those systems evolve in decades and centuries. They don't evolve in weeks and months.
I see. Wow. But but 3 years does seem like a long time. But 3 years to reach 5 million people. Doesn't sound bad. So hopefully other countries are gonna move probably quickly, so that we can see the big change. But I kind of also wanted to ask you about this Africa, but also you touch on you sometimes talk about El Salvador, and you mentioned about you might fly to El Salvador to have a meeting or something. I don't know. Like, do you have any visions or is it something that you want to do maybe in that country?
Yeah, we definitely did consider El Salvador as a jurisdiction, and we're just we'll just leave it at that. There's the deal's coming out on the 7th. September 7th, the law is coming into effect, and we'll see what happens with that, with El Salvador. It's one of those countries where it's very exciting that they've passed a law and they've made Bitcoin legal tender, but there are a lot of nuances to that make it more difficult than it would with a country, let's say, than Japan or or United States or Canada. And so whenever you see a jurisdiction like that, you always have to be very careful with the details and the checks and balances and these types of things. However, it did create a trend throughout all of Central America and Latin America and South America, where now we're seeing pro-Bitcoin laws being passed in Uruguay and Paraguay, and also the other Northern Triangle countries, Honduras and Guatemala. And so I do believe that ultimately it's going to have a long-term positive impact for the adoption of cryptocurrencies. But I don't necessarily know if El Salvador is going to be the ideal bulwark of the embracing of crypto. And so it's probably going to be in a smaller nation like, let's say, Bermuda or something like that, where they can move even faster. And also they don't have a lot of the legacy problems that El Salvador does. I mean, if you look at the population dynamics, there's 8 million El Salvadorans, 6 million live in the country, about 2 million live in the United States. The GDP is $26 billion, and $6 billion of that is from remittances from the United States into El Salvador. So it's a kind of under pseudo-U.S. jurisdiction in that respect. And there's a lot of issues with gangs like MS-13, and it's mostly a cash economy. Over 70% of the economy is unbanked. So there's a lot of nuances and details. Now contrast that with Bermuda, 71,000 people. The poverty rate is only 11%. Everybody has internet. Most people are Western educated, and they have a very evolved fintech sector. 85% of the GDP comes from financial technologies. They're on, and they're on many. Their GDP is about $6 billion, and they have about $1 billion in tax revenue, $1 billion in expenditures. Their debt is only 40% of GDP. And they run usually no deficits. So Bermuda is, an example of a country that would get me a little bit more excited, because there, if you create a system, that's a backdoor into the U.S. economy and to the UK. It's a bridge in both cases, and it's a great model for how cryptocurrency could be adopted throughout the entire Caribbean and then work its way into many other places. But you don't have to worry about shadow banks or criminal elements or banking 70% of the unbanked or things like that. So I think that's a better country for the adoption of digital currencies if a nation state is considering that. That said, our mission is to bank the unbanked. We as a company care a lot about this. So we think just through decentralized spreading of the software that can be accomplished in places like El Salvador and Honduras. No one has to ask permission to download a Cardano wallet or a Bitcoin wallet. You do that yourself. And we see a lot of organic adoption. We have millions of people floating around our ecosystem from Japan to South Africa. So the same can occur in El Salvador and other places. The U.S. government is curious about that too.
I thought this there's an argument in Japan, because BTC is now foreign currency technically, so then some people argue that, it should really be a foreign currency, not like a cryptocurrency. But I guess US doesn't really consider that as the foreign currency, right?
Yeah, so countries sign treaties. Japan and the U.S. have both signed treaties that agree to honor reciprocal currencies. And so El Salvador, by saying Bitcoin is legal tender, a strict interpretation of some of these treaties would mean that Bitcoin is now going to be considered a foreign currency under U.S. law or under Japanese law. But there are more nuances there.
Yeah.
Japan is a sovereign country. The U.S. is a sovereign country. And ultimately, your Ministry of Finance and our Department of Treasury make the decisions of whether they're going to honor it or not. The other thing is El Salvador actually has two currencies. It uses the US dollar and Bitcoin.
True.
And there's convertibility there. So whenever there's a dual currency system, the historical precedent is the governments will decide which one of the two they're going to honor. And because the unit of account is not set in Bitcoin, but it's set in US dollar, the U.S. government's position is to honor the U.S. dollar as the legal tender of El Salvador, and I think Japan is probably going to follow the same same path.
Yeah.
That said, Japan has differed from the United States in regulation of cryptocurrencies. The FSA had created a very comprehensive framework, and it's a tough one.
Right.
But there is a comprehensive regulatory framework and asset clarity. For example, what's happening to Ripple in the United States would never happen to Ripple in Japan. The FSA is quite comfortable with Ripple, and Ripple has great partners like SBI and so forth. Whereas in the United States, they're considered to be a security and they're being attacked and so forth. So I think Japan is actually ahead of the curve in certain respects on crypto regulation compared to the U.S.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting though. So I kind of wanted to switch back to the topic to more like a Cardano, and
Sure.
You talked about smart contract is coming, and then there's so many people who's watching as like a regular non-tech investors. So what does it mean for the regular investors, and what kind of exciting things gonna come after this smart contract?
So let's talk about transaction. That's kind of the unit of change for all cryptocurrencies. So a transaction has 5 parts to it. And these are universal, whether you're with, JP Morgan Chase Bank or Bank of America, or you're dealing with Bitcoin or Cardano or Ethereum.
Yeah.
So first there's what are you sending? So that's the value that's on the rail. And that could be a lot of different things. It could be a currency like the dollar. It could be a commodity like gold. It could be a stock. It can be a bond. It can be a cryptocurrency. It could be an NFT. It could be all kinds of crazy stuff. Where value is an abstract thing. So first, the first question you ask is, does your system have the ability to represent value abstractly? So Bitcoin does not. There's only one instrument of value that you can send transactions, and that's Bitcoin. Ethereum does through the ERC20 standard and these other standards, but it's kind of kludgy. Cardano does natively with the native asset. Second, it's about the identity of the actors involved. So are you going one-to-one? So Charles to you, you to me. Or are you going one to many, many to one, many to many? These types of transactions. So for example, like crowdfunding, lots of people send funds to one place. Many to many is lots of people are transporting to lots of other people, like a stock market or these types of things. Okay, so identity is super important. Okay, then third, it's the metadata component. So what's the story of the transaction? So the story is like, where did it happen? When did it happen? Why did you do it? These types of things.
Mm.
And that's super important. If you withdraw money from an ATM, there's a world of difference between withdrawing money from an ATM and, Namba versus Tobita.
Yeah.
So there's these things are not the same, right? Same amount of money, same type
True.
of transaction, but different location tells you
Mhm.
different intent with that setup. Okay, and then you have the contract side, and usually that's paper. So why are you sending money? Well, I'm donating. I'm buying something. Here's your receipt. I'm entering a contractual relationship, like you're going to fix my roof if I pay you 10,000 yen, something like that. Okay. So that's the contractual side, and that can be paper or automated. So a smart contract is just the automation of that agreement. Okay, and then finally, there's the meta component of regulation. So transactions always occur with people and jurisdictions, and so the regulatory framework that the transaction lives in is dependent on those people and those and jurisdictions. So if, for example, you're a Japanese company and you have someone in the United States access your server, you're actually under U.S. law. And Japan has taken the same position when Japanese citizens were accessing servers in Singapore and Hong Kong to trade cryptocurrencies. They said to those exchanges, hey, you're under Japanese law because you're dealing with Japanese customers and so forth. So those 5 components are always there: the regulatory components, the contract components, the metadata components, the identity components, and the value components. So the question is, what is the best machine to do all of that? And how do you do that in the most cost-effective, efficient way possible and make it as programmable as possible so you as the developer have the most flexibility? And this is what our industry is trying to figure out. In every cryptocurrency, Polkadot and Tezos and Ethereum and Cardano, we have slightly different philosophies on these things. So what we tried to do with Cardano was pick a philosophy that we felt had 3 criteria. One, it's easy to scale. So you can go from a few transactions to many transactions, but your cost stays relatively the same. You don't, as a developer or a business, want to wake up on Tuesday and find out you've doubled your operational expenses.
Yeah.
It doesn't work this way. You walk down the arcade, it's like the McDonald's there in Osaka. Their rent doesn't suddenly become $5,000 on Tuesday, and then it's $1,000 the next day. No business can operate under those terms. So you need predictability and scale of cost. And second, you need to have assurance that the things you think are true are true. So in other words, the software quality is okay. So you see hacks all the time. Like Poly just got hacked 600 million.
Right.
MakerDAO was just hacked. Thorchain was hacked. So people believe these things work, and then they blow up, and then millions to hundreds of millions of dollars get stolen. So as a developer and as a consumer, we need a system where it's very easy for us to determine what is high quality and what is low quality. Okay, just by looking at it, visually looking at that. And how we do that as consumers right now is usually the country of origin. So when it says made in Japan or made in the United States or
So
made
true.
in Germany, we say, oh yeah, it's high quality, because those are regulated markets. And you see made in China, you're like, I don't know about that. Okay, maybe, and so we can't do that with financial contracts or software. So we need some other mechanism to certify it and so forth. And then third, I think it's very important to have interoperability, meaning whatever contract you've written, application you've written, you can interface with many different systems and many different sets of customers. Because at the end of the day, if you're a developer, you're not supposed to be loyal to Cardano or to Ethereum or something. Because why would you be? It's like saying, oh, well, I'm writing this amazing web application and cell phone app, but it has to be on Amazon. It can't be on Microsoft. It has to be on Amazon Web Services. It's like, that's nuts.
Right.
You wouldn't think this way. You say, no, that's just infrastructure, and you're renting that infrastructure. And if it's not cost competitive, then you're going to move to different infrastructure. And people do this all the time, So you have to be slightly agnostic and fluid so that you are always living in the best environment for your business objectives. So what we tried to do with Cardano was say, build your app in a certain way, and you'll get predictable costs. You'll get the ability to certify the software and get the assurance levels you need for the value that you have at risk. And also, a lot of the stuff you build can be eventually ported to other systems and get customers from other systems. And then ultimately, it's going to allow you, to the developer, to benefit from those things. And then everything else is a particular detail, like, do you want a governance layer, or what type of metadata does your application require? But those are facts and circumstances connected to particular verticals, like oracles and stable coins, indexes, or video games with NFTs, or these types of things. And each of those categories, we have USPs that we think are pretty appealing and exciting. But I think the core of it, in the general sense, is just understand what you're actually doing. What is a transaction? Why are you doing that transaction? And then, are you doing it with predictability? Are you doing it with reliability? And are you doing it with flexibility? And if you don't have those properties, then I don't think you're going to be successful in your business. And ultimately, as an infrastructure provider, I'm here for you, the developer. I'm here for your business. I'm here to help you build your idea. The meta property is also customer based, like who's in our ecosystem. And so if you want access to African customers, or if you want access to developing world customers for your products, we're making a point to try to bring that population into our ecosystem as concisely as we can, so they can become your customers for your applications that you build.
So it sounds like maybe in the future it's going to be like a cost competition, I guess. Like everything is going to be interoperable, and then that will be real competitive advantage over other.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Even Microsoft servers now run Linux. So if you can write a Linux application and run it on an Azure, and you can do a cost comparison of Azure versus Amazon Web Services versus Rackspace or DigitalOcean or any of these other things. So it's very commoditized, and the infrastructure layers will become that way. And the real value is going to come from the additional things that the infrastructure provides you. Blockchain services, software quality services, ease of development, software lifecycle, all those standard things that we tend to look at when we're comparing Android versus iOS versus Microsoft or these types of things.
I see. Well, I actually realized we already close to the promised time. We have like 3 minutes left. So time flies so fast. But just to close the conversation, maybe could you provide closing remarks to Japanese community that they finally, officially buy ADA with full confidence, and maybe just message to people and community and what's coming this year to the Cardano.
Well, first I want to invite everybody in Japan to come to the Cardano Summit. We're having it in September. It's towards the end of the month. It's probably going to be around the third week of September. So I'd love to see everybody there. It's going to be a digital event, and so there's a physical locations. We'll try to have one in Tokyo, but then also there's going to be an online, and it's free to come. You don't have to pay anything. So we'd love for you to come there. We'll talk about the utility of the platform, the adoption, the impact, and the governance of it. And I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun. Second, I'd like to say thank you. The Japanese community was our first community, and they've been with us since 2015. And because of their patience and commitment, Cardano is where it's at today. This really is the Ethereum of Japan, and our soul is really there. We followed a lot of Japanese principles. This like almost like Kodawari. This relentless pursuit of perfection. And so we were obsessed with let's make it better. Let's keep refining. And it was almost like a way of life. And it's like so we said, hey, let's write another paper. Let's do another thing. And we really accomplished a lot of great things together, and that's because of that place we got started. So there's a profound thank you there. And third, I'd like to say, hey, we're open for business. Write your applications, start building software. By the time this airs, I think this date will be public, but we're probably going to launch smart contracts September 12th. So we're announcing that tomorrow. So don't publish this interview until tomorrow at 8 a.m.
Okay.
But anyway, so you heard it first here. The hard fork is going to happen in the second week of September. And that means Cardano's ready to go for people to start building their businesses, building their applications. And I would really love to see some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the cryptocurrency space coming from Japan. That would be a lot of fun and really cool, especially on Cardano, because this is where we came from. So it's a call to action, an invitation, and a profound thank you.
Cointelegraph. Like, subscribe, and hodl.